Hey everyone, and welcome to the DarkCast. I'm your host, Jonathan Miley. The DarkCast is supposed to be a bi-weekly discussion about video games and the culture that surrounds them. I've been struggling with the bi-weekly part here the whole time, but the show is divided up into multiple one-on-one conversations between myself and other writers here on DarkStation.com. This episode was recorded along with episode 8, and like it, this episode is late and had to be recorded twice due to technical issues, but it's here, so sorry for the wait. In section 1, I talked to Jonathan Paris about Microsoft's acquisition of Obsidian and inXile Entertainment. Also, since this was recorded, there's been a new interview with Fergus Urquhart about that purchase, so you can find that in the show notes to this episode. In Section 2, I talked to Alan Kesinger about the state of Star Wars games, or lack thereof. And in Section 3, I talked to Brian Tyler about the Spider-Man DLC, The City Never Sleeps. You can find timestamps for each section, as well as more information about the things we discuss in the show notes to this episode, which you can find on DarkStation.com. There you can also find the DarkCast interview podcast, as well as video game reviews, previews, and features. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at darkstation_com, find us on Facebook, check us out on YouTube, and email us at podcast@darkstation.com. As always, thank you so much for listening. Now on with the show. Welcome back to the DarkCast, everybody. I'm Jonathan Miley. Joining me is Jonathan Paris. How are you doing, Jonathan?
I'm pretty good, pretty good. How you about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. What about you? Anything new in life? Anything crazy?
I've been playing a lot of Hitman, actually. I'm actually really enjoying the second one much more than I did the first one. Well, the first
Okay, cool.
one they came out with last year.
Yeah. The new first one.
Right, exactly. The new one.
I really enjoyed, what was it, Silent Assassin and Contracts. But I think I played Blood Money, but for whatever reason, I didn't love it as much as everybody else did and never got around to Absolution. I probably have a copy of the new Hitman one, but it just, for whatever reason, isn't really my thing, unfortunately. But you know what's crazier than a bald guy running around in costumes and killing people?
What's that?
Microsoft buying Obsidian and inXile. Boom! Segue. That's
Perfect segue.
So this is a conversation that, well, one, we've wanted to have, but we've also already had, but due to issues with my computer, we're having again. And that is back at the end of 2018, we found out that Microsoft was not only buying inXile Entertainment, but also Obsidian Entertainment, which are two of the kind of front-runner game developers that have made video games on Kickstarter like such a big thing. And they've also been kind of some of the champions of old-school RPG gameplay, carrying that into the future. And so in some ways it seems like just a really bizarre move on Microsoft's end until Obsidian announced that they were making The Outer Worlds,
Right.
Which seems like a much more logical game for Microsoft to publish, but Microsoft's not even publishing that. That's being published by was the private division or the private sector. It's like indie publisher arm of Take-Two, or 2K, or whichever one of those is the parent company of the other. I have no idea, but But so it's really funny that like they get announced, it's being announced that they're being bought, and then it's announced that they're making this game that they've been working on for 2 years, and it's coming out in just a few months, and it's being published by somebody besides the people that just bought them.
Exactly.
That specializes in publishing games.
I think they just rebranded their name as well. They're not Microsoft Game Studios anymore. I think they're Xbox Game Studios or something like that now.
Interesting. That, I guess, I don't know, that sort of makes sense to sort of shift the brand away from Microsoft in and of itself, because I feel like they don't always have a good reputation. One, because of all the games that they cancel, which, like, that's the thing that makes me, like, the most scared in all of this. Like, I don't want to see these talented developers get funds and resources to make something and then it, for whatever reason, not be what Microsoft wants them to make, and so the whole studio gets canned. Because we see that a lot, especially in, like, EA. There'll be this promising new little studio that pops up. It gets bought by EA. It's announced that they're working on something really cool. We don't hear anything for a couple of years, and then you find out the studio was closed
down.
And it's just like, yeah. So that, I guess that's, kind of like my biggest fear in all of this, because Microsoft they're not as notorious as EA in doing that, but they've definitely done their fair share of announcing projects, it being silent for a long time, then canceling projects, and even canceling studios. My heart still breaks every time I think about the fact that we don't have Lionhead or Ensemble Studios anymore.
Yeah,
like that's just tragic.
I believe they shut down Ensemble right after they released maybe the first Halo Wars.
Yeah, the first Halo Wars. Yeah, they worked on that. I want to say it was announced that they were working on some sort of Age of Empires type of game. Maybe some sort of sequel or an online version or something like that. But I feel like that got shut down. But I was just looking it up. Actually, you are correct. It is now the Xbox Game Studio.
Is it?
Not... Xbox Game Studio, not Microsoft Studios, which, kind of makes sense. But what I was originally going towards with was, Xbox is becoming more than just the console.
Yeah.
They announced that they're coming out with some sort of Xbox Live app for, like, a bunch of different devices, iPhones, Androids.
Switch,
which, like, I don't even understand what that means.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know. I need more clarification on that one.
But like the Game Pass is growing from just being on your Xbox to being on your PC as well. They've released some games that have been, if you buy it digitally, you can play it on the Xbox or you can play it on the PC, which is pretty neat.
Xbox Play
I think.
Anywhere.
Yeah, the Play Anywhere. So I guess it's this kind of idea of making it. Xbox is not just about the physical box that sits in your room, but it's a arm of video games. It's a service. It's a platform bigger than just a console.
Exactly.
Which I guess kind of again makes a little more sense in picking up these two, not really obscure, but just not a studio I would expect Microsoft to pick up.
Yeah. Especially both the studios aren't necessarily known for console games.
Right. But the good news is, and there's a interview with the CEO founder of inXile on Eurogamer, and I'll have it in the show notes. But they talked to the was it Ferguson, I think is his name. I don't actually have it up right now. I should probably do that, be a good podcast host, and actually be able to reference the things that I'm talking about. Fargo, not Ferguson. Brian Fargo, he talks about the fact that basically, like, the things that they're working on are not going to get obstructed in any way, supposedly. The Wasteland 3, which they're working on, is coming out to all consoles. It's not going to be Xbox exclusive or anything like that. They just released a Bard's Tale 4, and that's supposed to be making moves to consoles and stuff like that, and Microsoft's not really having any sort of hand in that. They're not going to be like merging the two studios or anything, but both of the developers, Brian Fargo and Fergus Urquhart, I never know how to pronounce his name, is the lead guy at Obsidian. They have kind of ties way back. And so Fargo was mentioning that it's actually pretty exciting that, you know, hopefully they can be able to like share resources and knowledge and stuff like that, which I think if there's a coolest part to all of this, I think that's probably the best part for me. Just because, you know, these are two studios that they're not making the same games, but they're like siblings or cousins or something like that.
Yeah.
They're in the same family, definitely. And so if they can help each other make better versions of the games that they've been making, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that inXile, Obsidian specifically, that was probably their best purchase. That's definitely I think their best purchase.
Yeah, Obsidian is a super talented studio, and honestly, I've been excited the last couple of years of the things that they've been making, because, you know, we all know the story about Knights of the Old Republic 2 being shipped like 6 months before it was supposed to be, and it was bug-ridden, and it was basically missing the ending, and whole planets were like just axed, without much cover up. Like, you can see stuff, find things about their location in the game and whatnot, and it's really disappointing. And, you know, if Knights of the Old Republic 2 was released today, sure, it would be a really bad launch, but a lot of things are released in broken states. And that can actually be fixed. You know, they could go back and fix that stuff, but that wasn't the case. But the same thing has happened in other cases, like Fallout New Vegas. Again, it wasn't unfinished, but it was a janky mess when it came out. And Alpha Protocol, which, I mean, you can argue it, but nobody's ever going to convince me that is one of the most underrated games ever. I love it so much. But, like, one of the crazy things about that, so, like, Obsidian has their head on straight, and everybody has claimed that they've had their head on straight. And so when they started this whole Kickstarter campaign and they did Pillars of Eternity, like, I was excited. That was not the type of game that I wanted to play, but I backed it because I was like, you know what, everybody says that Obsidian's talented. I want them to put their money where their mouth is. If they can make their own time frame, if they can not be beholden to some big publisher that says your game has to come out now, like, I want to see them actually make something quality. And they did, and that's awesome. And then they did it again. With Pillars of Eternity 2. But I actually, several years ago, I got to go out to Obsidian because they made, of all things, like the people that made Knights of the Old Republic 2, people that originally worked on like the original Fallout games. These guys were making a free-to-play, like multiplayer online tank shooter game called Armored Warfare, and it was being like published by this Russian publisher called My.com, who their like biggest app is a mail app. I think it's My Mail or something along those lines. But anyway, I got to go out to this big event, and we got to play the game all day long, and then we went out on a boat, which was really cool. And all of the journalists and the YouTube people were like hanging out together, and all the game developers were hanging out together because we were on the boat for like 4 hours.
Yeah.
So people kind of naturally drifted apart, but I got to sit down and listen to a bunch of drunken developers talk about video games, and I wish I could remember, all the things that were spoken, because I could probably get rich. But I was drunk too, so I don't remember any of those things, except for one specific thing, and it was about Alpha Protocol. So I'm actually, this winding narrative, it's going to make sense eventually. But so Alpha Protocol was done like 6 months before it was released, and Sega did not want them to release the game. So they weren't being paid to work on it anymore, so they had to go work on the other projects that were actually bringing them revenue. So Alpha Protocol basically sat for 6 months before being released. They weren't able to do any fixes in terms of crushing bugs or whatever the proper term is there.
Yeah.
But the other thing is Obsidian wanted to use a more traditional shooter format for how the gunplay worked. So if you're aiming at somebody's head, you get a headshot. But Sega wanted it to be a more traditional RPG in that every shot is a roll of the dice. So you don't know if you're actually going to hit the person with your bullet or not. And so it just makes me so angry, because I feel like if Alpha Protocol had gotten that 6 months extra development and they were able to make the game they wanted to, because I'm sure there are plenty of other things along the lines of make it shoot like a normal shooter, that we would have Alpha Protocol 4 by now.
Yep.
And everybody would have taken solace in that series after they were disappointed by Mass Effect, and Obsidian would be on top of the world. And you, like I said, you can't convince me differently. But that's a whole crazy rant that really has no bearing on any of this, except that maybe Microsoft will let them make Alpha Protocol 2. You never know.
Maybe. I keep hope alive on that one.
I'll be sitting here hoping by myself, but I'll be hoping.
Well, I kind of feel the same way about, just like you feel that no one can tell you about Alpha Protocol. I'm a huge Knights of the Old Republic 2 fan, even though it had this criticism and it did have its bugs, but that's still one of my favorite games from the Xbox and the PS2 generation.
Sure.
Yeah, I absolutely love that game. But as well as this, was it last generation that came out to South Park on the 360?
Yeah. Yeah, the Stick of Truth, they did that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was really well done, because before that, because I'm a huge South Park fan too, so. And before that, all the South Park games before that never really paid true homage to the series, to the actual TV show. Obsidian was the first developer who actually made a great South Park game. And so I agree with you. They are definitely talented developers, and if you just look at how long they've been around, there's not many developers who've been around in the 90s who are still making games today. So their longevity, I think, speaks for itself as well. Sure.
And I'm hoping, because I'm looking at a list of the current studios that now Xbox Game Studios has under its branch, and we've got 343 Industries, the studio that picked up Halo after Bungie went to Activision and now recently left.
Activision.
You've got the Coalition, which is the studio that picked up where Epic Games left off with Gears of War. Compulsion Games, the guys that made We Happy Few. The Initiative, which I'm actually having to look up right now. I don't think I've ever heard of before.
Yeah, they created them, I believe.
Okay. Yeah. I have no idea what that studio is. inXile, obviously. Minecraft, which I guess is Minecraft not... Did they just pick up the property, not Mojang Studios? Or however you pronounce that? I always thought that they picked up the actual studio.
No, I believe they bought Mojang. I believe they bought Mojang.
Mojang, I don't... Yeah. Ninja Theory, though, which is another excellent pickup.
Yes.
Enslaved Odyssey to the West is one of my favorite games. It's super good. I've not gotten into Hellblade yet, but I want to. It's free on Game Pass now, so I should dive into that at some point.
Enslaved? Is that Theory?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was their first multi-platform game, because they did Heavenly Sword, which was a pretty blatant God of War ripoff.
Yeah.
Or not really ripoff, but just in terms of combat, very much a copy of that style. Then they did Enslaved. Then they did the Devil May Cry remake, which now they're going back to the old style of games. And then they did Hellblade. So randomly, just trekking back to previous part of the conversation, Mojang, however it's pronounced, is owned by Microsoft. It's not just the Minecraft property. So anyway, Ninja Theory, Obsidian, obviously, Playground Games, the studio that makes the Forza Horizon games, which they're supposedly working on something not a driving game, which is really cool.
I heard that rumor.
Then you've got Rare, which is probably, of all of these things, like, Rare is the one that makes me nervous for any of these things, because when they picked up Rare, they made, Grabbed by the Ghoulies, and then Rare was, like, shuffled off to only make Xbox Avatar stuff and Kinect games for years, and Sea of Thieves is the first, like, real game that they've gotten to make in a long time, and that obviously had issues.
Right.
But just kind of the model there, and then also talking about, what happened to Lionhead and all that, like, it just, I don't know. I don't know if I can trust Microsoft again yet.
Yeah, well, that's a good point about the Rare, because Rare was really mismanaged when Microsoft bought them back in 2000, whatever. They had. I mean,
it's probably like 15 years ago now that purchase came through.
Yeah, I was actually talking about Rare with one of my friends the other day. All the games they made back in the 90s, they were one of the best developers when Microsoft bought them.
Yeah, they were. They were indeed. And it was kind of a shock, because they had been making, Nintendo games exclusively for forever. And then they got bought by Microsoft, and then basically it seems like they got shut into a closet. So that's, I don't know. I guess, it's exciting because you've got these two developers that have been super scrappy for a long time, making smaller games, making a few sort of like AA games here and there, picking up deals with different different publishers to publish games, like the South Park game or whatever. But I feel like both of them have had to work incredibly hard to just stay afloat. And now they get the money and resources that is Microsoft. And so, I've already obviously said all the things that I'm like nervous about in all this, but the exciting thing for me is if Microsoft is taking kind of this hands-off approach and they're not going to just screw everything up, it's really cool. I'm excited to see what these two developers are going to do with money, time, and resources. Yeah. I think it could be great.
Yeah, I do too as well, especially for Obsidian. But two other pickups that I also like was Compulsion, because they made We Happy Few, and I thought We Happy Few kind of had the same problem that some of Obsidian's games and inXile's games that have. It just really budgeting and not having the money to kind of really do what you want to do with the game. And I kind of feel like We Happy Few had a lot of potential. It just kind of needed a little bit more money, and I feel like when Microsoft buying Compulsion, they'll have those resources. So I'm pretty excited to see what they do next, as well as obviously Ninja Theory, because I thought Hellblade was an amazing game. That was technically an indie game.
Yeah, and the Compulsion only became a Microsoft studio like right before the game released, didn't they? Like that thing was in early access for a couple of years before officially being released, I believe. And that game has a fantastic art style. I remember when it was first announced, I was so happy and wanted to play it, and then I found out it was a roguelike, and I was like,
yeah. When that game actually came out, though, it was less roguelike. It did a lot of changes throughout the early access that it had. It started off kind of roguelike, and then it kind of came out with a really pretty good fleshed out story, but a lot of bugs, frame rate, that kind of stuff.
Well, anything else? I think. I don't know what else to say about this big deal.
Who else I'm trying to think of who else did they pick up that we could be forgetting. I know you just went through the list.
Well, obviously they've got Turn 10, which are the people that make the regular Forza games. Then there's Undead Labs, which
State of Decay. Yeah,
State of Decay.
That's who it is. Yeah.
Which I've not played the second State of Decay. I dabbled in the first one and had a pretty good time with it until, I don't know, I just felt like it was just this onslaught of too many like random side activities, and you're constantly having to like keep everything else up in the game and feed people and keep people from being sick, and it was a little too micromanagey. for my taste, when the kind of core gameplay is you running around and shooting zombies.
Yeah, the State of Decay 2 is not too much different.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not too much different. It's kind of the same thing. It's not really a core story. It's just a lot of micromanaging. But
gotcha.
I like the games though. They definitely could use some more Microsoft's money. So hopefully with this, with them buying them, we won't have those type of bugs. So the games are pretty buggy.
Yeah, well, I want to say Undead Labs was purchased before State of Decay 1 even came out. So State of Decay 2 was funded with Microsoft money.
Oh, that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign because it definitely was buggy. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. You're right. They did buy. Because I remember before State of Decay 2 came out, I was hoping that they actually didn't win like AAA. I remember that. Hoping that it went AAA. It came out and still wasn't.
Yeah, it was. So State of Decay 1 came out in 2013, and Microsoft announced that. Oh no! Okay, actually, hold on. I'm looking up some information on it right now. So in 2014, right after State of Decay came out, it was announced that they were doing a multi-year, multi-title agreement with Microsoft, but Microsoft did not actually purchase the studio until E3 2018, which was after State of Decay 2 came out. So maybe that's a good thing.
Maybe. Still, they did have the agreement with them, so we'll.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's bizarre. It's like I said. It's been done dirty too many times to like only feel good about this situation. I feel like
I'm a little bit more optimistic about it just because I kind of look at since Phil Spencer's taken over Microsoft, I kind of feel like kind of turned around a little bit.
Sure.
Because they had a rough launch when the Xbox One launched, but I kind of feel like now with Phil Spencer's direction, that they actually want to go on more of a, like you said, a hands-off approach and just let the developers do what they want to do and kind of come out with better games. Because if you look at Sony's been killing it this whole generation with exclusives. There's a list of games they're coming out with, and Microsoft's haven't really been coming out with much, and everybody's noticing that. Everybody's talking about that online and things like that. So I think they hear that criticism, and I think they're kind of gearing up more for next generation. But one thing that I think a lot of people may have forgot is before the Coalition became the Coalition, they were Black Tusk Studios, I believe, or Black Tusk something, and they were actually working on what was supposed to be a AAA new IP for the Xbox before Microsoft bought Gears from Epic and made them start making the Gears game. So I would be curious. I'm curious to know if they're ever going to return to that, because I would like to see what they would do with their own IP as opposed to just constantly keep making Gears. And same thing with 343. I would like to see them doing something else besides Halo, but we'll see how Microsoft goes about that.
Yeah, it seems, I don't know. Franchises are definitely things that, I mean, that's the thing that is, I don't want to say kept the PS4 afloat, because that's the wrong verbiage, but franchises are what have made the PS4 so strong, is, sequels, full-on reboots of games, of, things that people know and love, new franchises. But to tie a studio like only to that franchise seems kind of weird. Like the Coalition is, I don't know, you could sort of, it doesn't have to be Gears of War, but I mean, Coalition goes along with COG, the coalition of whatever government or something. I haven't played Gears in forever. I don't remember what COG stands for. But like 343, yeah. 343 is like a direct reference to Guilty Spark from the first couple of Halo games. Yeah. So like they are obviously tied to the Halo franchise, and having a studio that solely, like, they can basically only make these games just seems nuts to me. Like, that's just
yeah. I still believe that that's why Bungie left Microsoft. I believe that Microsoft wanted them to keep making Halo, and they want to make Destiny.
Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Or just anything else.
Yeah, anything.
I mean, at that point, they had been making Halo games for like 10 years.
Yeah.
So, and if you look at their past, they would make, like 3 to 5 games in a series, and then they would make something new. They did the Marathon series. They did Myth, which was like RTS game. They did a third-person action game called Oni. They did a bunch of like varied stuff before they got to Halo. But then from 2001 to 2009, 2010, when Reach came out.
Yeah,
that was all they made.
Yeah, I think if you look at the way Sony manages their developers as opposed to Microsoft, you see a drastic difference. Microsoft seems to be focused more on IPs, not new IPs, but I mean, all new IPs are new, but exclusives, I should say. You look at Sony, they're more focused on the developers. You look at Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog's known for Uncharted and Last of Us and what was it, Jack and Daxter earlier.
Right. Yeah.
But Naughty Dog isn't tied to Last of Us or tied to Uncharted. If Naughty Dog came out like at E3 or anything like that, as soon as people see Naughty Dog's logo, they go crazy. They don't even know what the game is. You see Naughty Dog's logo, you go crazy. Same thing for, you look at Santa Monica or just some of Sony's developers. And then you look at Microsoft developers. No one's going crazy when they see the Coalition go up or any of their studios, because their studios aren't necessarily known or famous, I guess you could say, for making great games, as opposed to Naughty Dog or something like that. So I think Microsoft needs to focus more on their studios as opposed to the games the studios are making. If they would have kept Bungie,
I agree,
and not focus so much on Halo, they could have had Destiny.
Sure. Or something like Destiny, or whatever Destiny would have been. Yeah, no, definitely. I agree. And I don't know, maybe I feel like, the Coalition, and even just like by its name, the Coalition like has no personality.
None at all.
But I don't know, like I feel like inXile and Obsidian are pretty well known.
Yeah.
And they have a studio personality. And so I feel like seeing a, big Obsidian logo up on the Microsoft E3, presentation screen, like a bunch of people would get really excited about that. And so maybe this is that shift towards that more developer-focused era for Microsoft, as it were. I don't know.
Yeah. I agree, because Obsidian, that's a developer that has impact. When Obsidian announced Outer Worlds, everybody went crazy. Because everybody knows and loves it.
Part of that was just because it was the perfect timing with the shit show that Fallout 76 has been.
That's a whole nother podcast. Talk about Fallout.
That is. Fallout but that is
honestly.
That is an amazing like coincidence right there. That is. They almost had to have like insider knowledge to know. It's like, oh, we were going to announce this earlier, or maybe we're going to announce it later, but no, this is perfect, right here.
Right here. Don't even get me started on Fallout 76.
That's well, I'm not.
That's the whole
what this podcast is about. All right. Well, you got any other thoughts about Microsoft picking up Obsidian or inXile?
Hopefully, we get nice Old Republic too. Well, actually, no, technically we can. I guess that would be EA. So,
yeah,
we'll see.
Well, that actually goes along quite well with another section of this podcast. So maybe I'll work some magic and tie these two together. But Jonathan, thank you for sitting down with me and talking about Microsoft and Obsidian and inXile. We will be back in just a moment to talk about more video game stuff.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back to the DarkCast, everybody. I am Jonathan Miley. Joining me for this segment is Mr. Alan Kesinger. How are you doing?
Hello, good. Doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. We're here to talk about something,
Yep.
So I was gonna make a joke about this thing taking place a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. But you know what? It really does kind of feel like the era of Star Wars games is from a long time ago.
It really does.
And a land far, far away.
Yeah.
And so that made me sad as I was about to make that joke.
I mean, like, think of how cool it would be if we had, like, a Knights of the Old Republic, like, now, with social media being what it is, and, like, everybody kind of, you know, getting...
collectively losing their shit over
revenue. Yeah, and hopping over to the social water cooler and talking about, oh my god, you know...
Yeah. So we're here to talk about kind of the state of Star Wars games. There was a recent article by Variety talking about Disney saying that they've never been good at games and they're happy with their partnership with EA so far, which is crazy because EA has made all of 2 Star Wars video games,
right?
Battlefront 1 and Battlefront 2, both of which have had their share of controversy. I don't think... There's probably plenty of people that are relatively happy with those games, but I don't think there's like anybody that's really happy with how this situation has turned out.
It's funny, they most recently announced, no, that's not true. Let me start over with that. They, the last time I checked in with Battlefront 2 was when they added the Clone Wars content, and I played that, and once again, if I haven't said it on here before, I will say once again, but that game looks so good. Like, it's so the visual design, the production of it is fantastic, and getting to play Geonosis, especially at a point where if you manage to destroy the droid ship, you get like this big wall of sand, and it's just like that scene in Clone Wars where you just have the clone troopers are going in, and pretty much the only light in that scene is coming off from the red and blue blaster bolts. I mean, they replicate that in the game so well, and then I get to the kind of, you know, I'm waiting to start the next match, and it's like, oh yeah, it's all this stupid star card nonsense and all this leveling up cards, and oh yeah, I can't find joy in this game no matter how hard I try, and yeah, you know, it's playing that game is such a bummer because I wish it had the simplicity of Battlefront 1. And without all this nonsense that they had to go back and take out, and well, everybody knows that story, but yeah.
So I bring that up to talk about kind of where Star Wars games used to be, and the first thing I actually want to ask you is, outside of from kind of the normal favorite Star Wars games, you've got your classics like Knights of the Old Republic and the original Battlefront 2. Then you've got your cult classics like Republic Commando. Kind of barring some of those better known Star Wars games, what would be your favorite Star Wars game, Alan?
Well, since you've already said Knights of the Old Republic and Republic Commando, I would have to say the one game that I found myself playing a lot in college, and like I think I've played through it about maybe 5 or 6 times, if that, maybe even more, is X-Wing Alliance. And that came from the family of X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. It was the last sort of game that they did, and it was basically a Star Wars flight sim. And anybody who's familiar with X-Wing versus TIE Fighter will kind of know what kind of game it is. But essentially, you go on these missions, and you get to fly iconic Star Wars ships. But what was great about X-Wing Alliance was that it was kind of centered around this family. Not affiliated with the Skywalkers, not affiliated with the Solos or any of the main characters like that. They were just their own family doing their own thing. They had a mining operation, and they also happened to be sympathetic to the Rebel Alliance. Well, after kind of helping them out, the Empire kind of catches wind and basically imprisons their family, leaving you and your sister and your older brother, who flies a fire spray, which is the model of Boba Fett's ship. And basically you're kind of displaced. You're left without a home, and your family is captured by the Empire. So they join the Rebel Alliance. And what's great is it puts you in missions that you're not, except for the very end where you're launching the attack on the second Death Star, you're really not doing anything from the movies. You're actually doing stuff that like you didn't see. So there's a mission where you have to go help the Bothans who are trying to steal the Death Star plans. You are part of the fleet action that is kind of massing around Sullust as the sort of diversionary tactic. But I think my favorite mission is one that's taken right from Shadows of the Empire. So you're flying alongside Dash Rendar, and and speaking of Shadows in the Empire, I would also say that Shadows in the Empire from the N64 is one of my favorite Star Wars games. If nothing else, for the very last level of the game where you're launching the rebel attack against Prince Shizor's Skyhook. And that's also the moment when the Empire comes in, and Vader, who has had a grudge against Shizor, kind of sees this opportunity to like kill him. But you are flying the Outrider, and it's just, for the N64, it was phenomenal. It's just this giant space battle. And your mission is just to kind of go fly through the Skyhook, Return of the Jedi style, and destroy like the shield generators and whatnot. But it's not timed, so there was nothing stopping you from just flying around and shooting down TIE fighters alongside X-Wings and stuff like that. And it's using the incredible soundtrack that Joel McNeely did for it. And it was awesome. I mean, if I could pick out, there are a lot of Star Wars games that I've played and either enjoyed or would like to forget. But if I could call out two of them, I would definitely say X-Wing Alliance and Shadows of the Empire.
I like that. Good choices. I never played any of the X-Wing or TIE Fighter games. I remember a lot of people really liking them, but for whatever reason, that wasn't something that I played. If I was going to give a shout out to any, it'd obviously be the Dark Forces Jedi Knight saga.
Oh, yeah.
So when Kyle Katarn was first created, he was basically a not Han Solo character. So in his very first game, Dark Forces, he's not related. He's just a pilot who's a smuggler. He is straight up Han Solo.
Han Solo, yeah.
And so is Dash Rendar. Dash Rendar is not Han Solo.
Right.
So I assume, they wanted to do Han Solo stories, and then they couldn't get like the rights to Harrison Ford's likeness or something like that. And so they're like, okay, we'll just make somebody that's not Han Solo. So I would love for them to somehow combine those two characters into one, so that you've got Kyle Katarn and maybe his, instead of flying the Raven's Claw, he flies the Outrider. Maybe he's got a computer sidekick called Dash or something like that. I think would be super neat. And then Janor's obviously has to
Oh, of course. I since we're on the Jedi Knight, I just want to share one memory of Jedi Knight 2 that I have that will always stick with me Jedi even after I leave this mortal coil. But back in the heady days of PC gaming, and my extensive time with Jedi, you want to talk about a game I played over and over, that was definitely it. One of my favorite things to do was there was a sort of like ladder mod that you could install that was basically Kyle Katarn versus lightsaber wielding characters. Sometimes you fight against one, sometimes you fight against three, sometimes you fight against one really hard one, and then like the cloaking shadow troopers will come in, and then finally you fight Desan to the music of the main track from Conan the Barbarian. It was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. But my favorite mod, my favorite Star Wars video game experience was when I downloaded a mod that changed it had changed Kyle and Jan to Han Solo and Chewbacca. And anybody who remembers the end of Jedi Outcast, where Kyle and Katarn make out with each other, you get the most glorious, probably something most people have wanted to see forever, but you get to see Han Solo like full on kissing Chewbacca, and it's amazing.
Oh, that's hilarious.
It's amazing. That has burned into my mind, and I'm never letting that one go.
Oh, that is awesome. As soon as you said that they were swapped, that was the first thing that I thought of, is at the end when they're reunited, they kiss. And I'm just like, huh, that's pretty great.
So, Jonathan, what's your favorite Star Wars video game memory of these last 5 years?
Of these last 5 years, it's definitely got to be playing through The Force Awakens on Disney Infinity, which is no longer with us. So it's really interesting that Disney went on record saying, that they've never been good at video games and they're happy with what EA's doing, even though EA doesn't seem to be doing a particular whole lot these days. And the fact that the Disney Infinity games, they're definitely for kids. Like, they're not hard games or anything like that. They're not mechanically very complex, but they're better than they have any right to be. And one of the things that I love about the entire series is how I feel like even though they didn't start with the Star Wars property, that didn't come until the 3.0 version of the game. The art style is actually very reminiscent of the CGI Clone War cartoon. But it's somehow they went through all of their properties, and it's like they found the common denominator of everything. And so everything still looks like its source, but at the same time, everything looks like it belongs in the same world with everything else. And I just find that to be amazing. I want to give whoever was in charge of the art direction of this game like a big hug and a high five and take him out and buy him a beer or her. Because it's just so good. And it just boggles my mind that I guess Disney has already forgotten that they made those games and they don't care about them anymore, because it's really tragic. I mean, we've had one Lego Star Wars game since the new Star Wars era has begun.
Lego
one
Force
for Force Awakens. But we didn't get one for Rogue One or Last Jedi or Han Solo. The visceral game that was, EA didn't really talk about it that much, but it felt like the murmur, the kind of the talk amongst the people online was just there and always kind of rumbling. And then it gets canceled, and that studio gets shut down. And so it's visceral. It's the people that made Dead Space. And EA Motive, who was like a bunch of really well-known people from a bunch of other companies. We had Jade Raymond, who was one of the instrumental people behind both Splinter Cell and Assassin's Creed. And we've got Amy Hennig, who came on board, who is
I love her.
the godmother of Uncharted. And she's the godmother of Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, which is phenomenal.
It breaks my heart that we won't get to see her Star Wars game. It breaks it totally breaks my heart.
It's insane.
I mean, if in my sort of like dreamscape, like I see her picking up Star Wars 1313, because that seems that would have been a perfect for her to take, and I mean, inject some maybe Uncharted blood into it, but like just her. The thing
is you could take an Uncharted game and you could throw Star Wars on top of it. And call it 1313 or whatever you want to call it. You can change the name. I don't care. But Nathan Drake is already a smuggler type person who could be in a Star Wars game. Like, I'm not saying that it wouldn't require a lot of work, because all video games require a lot of work.
Sure.
But I feel like there's a relatively simple route to take pre-existing video game archetypes, both mechanically, character-wise, all that kind of stuff, put Star Wars-ness on top, and people will gobble that up.
God, now I really want a picture of all the Uncharted characters dressed as Star Wars characters. I want to see Sully dressed up as Lando.
See, I was just thinking Sully as Chewbacca,
That
but
could
with
work too.
A giant gray mustache on top of all the rest of the fur and a cigar.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And a Hawaiian shirt instead of the bandolier.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, God, that'd be amazing.
Internet, get on it.
But, and then I don't know. I feel like...
So, like, those games have been canceled, and then, like, what do we have? What do we have left? It's this mysterious game that Respawn is doing, right?
Right. Which I don't even understand the title. It's not Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. Mm-hmm. It's Star Wars Jedi : Fallen Order. Like, that doesn't even make sense.
Right.
That's
right.
So is Star Wars Jedi a new sub-franchise of Star Wars in which there will be other sequels or spin-offs or prequels or whatever that go, like, that is a weird naming convention that I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, and I don't know if they're like trying to evoke like the Jedi Knight games or what, but I mean, because all we really have is that awkward E3 interview,
right, where he was like in the crowd. It wasn't even on stage.
Yeah, it's just it's really frustrating as a Star Wars fan who has enjoyed many a game over the years and like has seen the whatever your feelings of the prequel films aside, that 1999 to I think the last one was 05. Like for me, for me, like that was when I had disposable income. That was where like I could really take my interest in Star Wars to new financial levels. And like you could count on a game. I mean, it didn't have to be a good one. God, I remember when the Phantom Menace video game came out and pretty much spoiled the game, but it was like, dude, it's a Star Wars game. This is fine. I
loved playing it. Like, I had a friend who had it on PlayStation 1 and we played the crap out of it. Yeah. And it was bad. Like, it was not a good game, but we had a great time. One, because we were young, but two, because it was all this cool Star Wars stuff. And then there was there was
Jedi power battles, and then there was
the Jedi or not Jedi, but the Obi-Wan Kenobi game.
Yep, there was the Obi-Wan
exclusive to Xbox, which was so bad.
Yeah, there was the pod racing arcade game where you can actually sit in a pod racer.
Yeah,
there were, God, they even had the Yoda desktop adventures. And I mean, like, you could count on something being made. They made Rebellion, which was a pretty cool Star Wars RTS game. Mm-hmm. And now it's nothing. I mean, it's the only games that seems to be being made are ones that can be, they're still making money off of it. It's, with like loot boxes and stuff like that. I mean, it's in that sort of like world we live in where the game has to keep making it's the game as a service sort of thing, right? Mm-hmm. We're not getting story-driven Star Wars games. We're not getting adaptations of the films, whether they're Lego form or not. There's nothing, and it's just so. Again, as a Star Wars fan who loves playing Star Wars video games, quality issues aside, it's really frustrating.
Like, I don't know where you go from here, from where EA is at. Like, I don't know where you go from here.
Right.
Because I feel like the easiest thing in the world they have managed to screw up.
Mm-hmm. And, like, the report, too, about, like, BioWare wants to make another Knights of the Old Republic and EA is saying no. I mean, what the hell is up with that?
It's madness, man. I feel like ever since the Old Republic instead of Knights of the Old Republic 3 was announced, I feel like we've been on the downward slope of Star Wars and video games. Because whether or not that is a good game is neither here nor there.
Sure.
It's that's not what should have been made next.
Right.
And when I clearly remember in an interview when somebody asked, like, okay, so when are you making Knights of the Old Republic 3? It was like, well, we are making it. It's in here. We've got Knights of the Old Republic 3 and 4 and 5, and like as many Knights of the Old Republics as you want. It's like, no, that's not what you made. You made an MMO. Like,
right. I mean, because to its credit, Old Republic's storytelling is very well done for an MMO. You know, they found a cool way to make it all work, and that, you know, I think there were maybe 2 instances where I needed other people with me to complete my story. And there are a lot of cool moments in it. I think one of my favorite had to be when I convinced a Jedi to kind of fall to the dark side and turn on her master, which made her master so despondent that he turned to the dark side and got killed by me.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Or the mission where I needed to go track down, like earlier, I needed to track down this Jedi. And so you go to Alderaan to meet her parents. And like, after finding out her locations, I killed them, you know, cause I'm a Sith. It's what I do. But like, you know, it's just, I want a Star Wars story without any strings attached. And by strings, I mean online connectivity or loot boxes. I want another game like Knights of the Old Republic, which incidentally you can play on an iPad these days, which I find amazing. You know, it's just give me one of those. Give me another Republic Commando. Could you imagine how good a Republic Commando game would look on the newest Unreal Engine? Holy crap. Holy crap. And those characters are canon now. They showed up in the Clone Wars cartoon. So, I mean, there's no reason that can't be a reason to not make one. But, you know, we live in a time where, like, hey, you know, it would be really cool and fans would really appreciate it if you made this kind of game. It's like, oh, yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah. Here's Battlefront 3 with more loot boxes. If you missed out on classic Star Wars games like Jedi Knight and X-Wing Alliance and Republic Commando, Steam, good old games, go there right now and just like immerse yourself in what was like the golden era for Star Wars video games. Because the way I see it, it ain't happening again. I mean, unless somebody else gets the license or they open it up, it's not going to be happening, which is sad.
It is. It's very sad. It's very sad because there's so much potential there, and we've seen that potential at its fruition, and so to see it in the state that it is now, I think is just like depressing.
At the very least, my desktop wallpaper is the promotion artwork for that Rainbow Six Siege, where you have the SWAT team bursting in, but it's been changed to Republic Commando.
Oh, nice.
And I mean,
see, that's like,
just a Republic Commando
as you were
skin.
talking about, as you're talking about Republic Commando, and in EA's desire to just make money all the time, like, I feel like it would just make so much sense to make Rainbow Six Siege Star Wars and call it Republic Commando.
Yeah. I mean, just reskin the commandos with the Trandoshans. You're done.
Well, this was a downer. Sorry, everybody.
You know, I'll end it up on I'll end it on a positive Star Wars memory.
We're going to take this even further down.
No. This is positive. This is something happy we can end on. One of my favorite things. There years ago, Lucasfilm put out a CD-ROM. It was Behind the Magic, I believe, and it was basically a Encarta style, like, curated piece of Star Wars, like, production material, interviews. The big selling point at the time was that it had, like, the first look at Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. But one of the main reasons I would pop that disc in at least 3-4 times a week was they had this little interactive section where you could try out classic Star Wars weapons, but it was done in the style of, like, it's on the Death Star, and it's basically those scenes in the James Bond movies where James Bond goes to see Q and just random stuff is happening, like, to show off different gadgets and stuff. So you get this stormtrooper who shows up and you're like, oh, I want to see what a thermal detonator does. And, like, someone throws an active thermal detonator at this stormtrooper, like off camera, throws it to the stormtrooper who kind of like juggles it and tries not to drop it, and he kind of just stands there. It's like, huh, and then just completely blows apart, and you see like his helmet and his like in his arm, kind of, it's not violent or anything. It's very cartoony, and you just sort of like kind of see all of his arms and limbs kind of fall and crash to the floor, and then that floor disappears and comes back up with a new stormtrooper where you could try out like a blaster. And the blaster was always my favorite because it would do that sort of like you'd see in a western. It's like, dance boy, and they'd shoot at his feet, and it starts out with this stormtrooper like trying to dodge this blaster fire, and then he just breaks out into a tap dancing routine that's pretty amazing, and he ends with like a little jazz hands flourish only to get shot in the chest, and then again this thing comes down and brings back another stormtrooper. It was so much fun. It was great.
That's funny.
It was great. It was stupid. It was great. I loved it. It was fun.
Some of the best things are things that you have to preface with. It was dumb. It was really stupid, but it was the best thing.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about our current frustration with the Star Wars, the state of Star Wars video games.
I needed to vent. That's what really this was about.
Hopefully some other people got some catharsis out of it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back in just a moment to talk about more video game stuff. Welcome back to the DarkCast. I'm Jonathan Miley. Joining me is
Mr.
Brian
Spider-Man.
Tyler. Yeah, Mr. Spider-Man. That's
Mr. Spider-Man.
We established that last time.
That's right.
You are Mr. Spider-Man.
For the purposes of these podcasts, Mr. Spider-Man. I'm
again,
the Wayne Newton of Spider-Man.
Again, no hyphen, no uppercase letters for trademark purposes, but you are Mr. Spider-Man. So, you reviewed Spider-Man and all of its DLCs. It's pretty good, right?
Yes, much like the game. I mean, these are high-quality DLCs. These are in fact, like, this is probably some of the better story DLCs I have played when it comes to those AAA games.
Where you might be a superhero, and, you fight crime.
If you are not a superhero and in some sort of other, like, post-game DLC, these absolutely run tops among those.
Sure.
Yeah, the city never sleeps until the city sleeps, and then it's asleep.
Which, spoiler warning, the last achievement is the city sleeps.
The city sleeps. Yeah. For now, the city rests. Yeah.
But quick,
get any more of those. I mean, I would not be opposed to it. But that's absolutely completely up to Insomniac before the inevitable Spider-Man 2.
Yes. So, quick spoiler warning. We're going to be spoiling things about the main game and all of the DLCs. So, if you don't want spoilers for that stuff, then go ahead and go to our next segment.
Yes.
So, run us through a quick synopsis of kind of what the three DLCs, the plot lines of the three.
All right. So, DLC 1, very Black Cat focused. Yes. Black Cat comes in, the Felicia Hardy, a.k.a. Spider-Man's Catwoman. She is hinted at being involved in a certain portion of the main game through little collectible, not really collectible, but more like a stand around and see visual things, and then you get a costume out of it at the end. That's
pretty cool costume.
It is a pretty cool costume. Yeah, it's got cat claws and everything, which is, I mean, it's not Spider-Man, but whatever. You do what you got to do. She likes to dress her dude, and she still thinks Spider-Man is her dude sometimes because it's fun to mess with him. He's such a goody two shoes, and she's definitely the bad girl. Felicia, not unknowns to Spider-Man. Spider-Man starts out his time after the whole Doc Ock raises the city scenario. starts off his time, hears about some artwork that may be stolen from a museum, that there are gangs that are interested in taking it. MJ tips him off to this. He goes, starts to defend the museum from the gangs when Black Cat shows up out of nowhere in the exhibit itself and is like, hey, Spider, go take care of those guys, and then we'll talk, and then takes off with the art. Because that's how she do. The rest of the first episode is you trying to deal with Black Cat with some of the information that she has, as well as trying to protect her from Hammerhead's goons, which is the main mafioso that she is dealing with. Hammerhead being kind of like a B tier at best Spider-Man villain. He is a flat top, in the comic books, straight up flat top old timey gangster. In this one, he is just like a kind of buffoon with a flat top because of a implanted metal plate in his skull that he likes to hit people with.
So one thing, before we continue with the story, one thing that I really liked about the first DLC, besides just being Black Cat focused, who they did a fantastic job with.
Yes.
And I love her new redesign.
Yes, her new
costume
is very cool.
Fits very well with the kind of redesigns that they've done. I wasn't always thrilled about some of them. I think Rhino and Scorpion are a little iffy. But overall, I think their versions of costumes are pretty great, and I really love Black Cat because she actually seems like somebody who might be interested in stealth and stealing rather than just constantly trying to keep her boobs from falling out of her costume.
100%. She has a very practical, as someone with a massive amount of cat burglar knowledge, she totally has a practical cat burglar suit.
So, but the other thing that I really loved in this one is that basically she gets Peter to help her by saying that her son has been kidnapped by Hammerhead, and she doesn't have a son, and that never happened.
Not only that, her phrasing of it and the way she puts it to Peter
makes it sound like his son.
Automatically think that it's his.
Yes, and it works so well.
Yes.
And the whole time, like when I finally played part 1, I think part 2 had just come out or had been out for a little while, and I was like, you know what? I haven't heard anybody talk about Peter Parker's son. Yeah. Like, he doesn't exist, does he?
Nope.
It doesn't. It's not there, is it?
It was a lie.
And I get through it, and it's like, yep, I should have seen that coming. Peter should have seen that coming.
Yeah, exactly. One of the other things that really makes me appreciate is the wonderful job they did in writing the relationship between Peter and MJ. In the fact that like Peter can tell MJ that he thinks he might have a son with her, and there is none of the like high school freak out. It's the, hey, we were broken up at the time. It's perfectly understandable that you had a girlfriend during that point. Like, this is, it's kind of weird that we could have a kid with you, but, you know, hey, we'll deal with it. It's okay.
I love that they kind of toy with it for just a second, because when he first tells MJ, like, he's talking to himself. He's worried that she's going to freak out. And she's like, you know what? I can't talk to you right this second. Like, give me a minute.
Give me a minute.
And they're like, your next
process this, which is
your next conversation.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Next conversation though, she calls up and she's like, yeah, okay, totally. Let's. We need to save this kid. And he's like, what? But you're not freaking out. Like, you're not. Wait, what? Huh?
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. Like, there's a kid that needs to be saved. Like, we can worry about that later. It's not important. You're right. We were broken up. It's cool.
It's cool.
And, like, I felt like both me and Spider-Man at that moment were just like, oh, wow. That's really mature. I wasn't expecting that.
Thank you, MJ. Yeah.
You're real cool. I like you.
Yeah, you're awesome. Exactly. But so continue with the... Back to the DLC. So numerous things happen. We do find out that not only is it not Peter's son, that the imaginary son is imaginary. It was all a ploy to get Peter to help her steal this last USB stick full of mafioso information that she was supposed to turn over to Hammerhead and does not plan to do. And the final shot is a look of Peter speeding towards her apartment as it explodes with her inside of it. Oh my gosh, Black Cat is dead. Oh my gosh, Peter's torn up about this. We know Hammerhead. We're left with a look at Hammerhead being the one to set off the explosion, and so that's how episode 1 ends.
Mm-hmm.
It was very like, wow, oh my gosh, did they actually do that? Spoilers, it's a comic book. No, they did not actually do that. But still, they kind of left it hanging there a lot, and then they, with episode 2, they just kind of moved on from there. There's a couple mentions at the beginning of what happened, of the fact that, Peter's still kind of in shock that it did happen. They are still actively chasing after Hammerhead to get him for the, obviously the damage he's caused and the life he's taken. But other than that, it moves on to kind of the next person in line, which episode 2 is very much about. Our friendly neighborhood captain, Yuri Watanabe.
Mm-hmm.
And that episode starts with a raid of one of Hammerhead's places. Yuri and her raid squad, as they will now be called, go in through the front door. Spider-Man comes in through the roof back door entrance place that, only a Spider-Man can use.
Mm-hmm.
As he busts his way through to Yuri, we are left with a cutscene where Yuri's men are head pounded by Hammerhead into extinction up until the point where it gets to the good captain herself, when Spider-Man is finally able to come in and make the save. And this, we're left with an understanding that this has profoundly impacted Yuri, as it should. I mean, this was her squad, this was her group, these were her officers, they were under her command. They totally got wrecked. And it's never made clear kind of how or what, like what happened that this breakdown occurred, that they were all kind of caught in this situation. But I mean, it happened. And from that point forward, Yuri's kind of forced into taking some time off. Spidey tells her, hey, listen, I've got this. I'm going to go ahead and handle this. And things just kind of get progressively worse through the episode, where situations kind of, through no real fault of Spider-Man's, kind of fall through his hands, where Hammerhead's guys keep getting away with Sable Tech. They keep getting more powerful, and Yuri keeps getting more and more upset at the actions and the goings-on of this ridiculous mafioso and his search for, what do we call Project Olympus?
Mm-hmm. Project Olympus.
And his search for this Sable project. Episode finally culminates on the roof of some building. It was probably one of Fisk's construction places, because that's what it looks like. Where you fight a Hammerhead in a cybernetic suit. The cybernetic suit itself, I made the comparison that it looks like Ed 209 in a couple of instances from the RoboCop movies. So this is Hammerhead 209. Yes. He kind of rushes around the space while you attack him, attack his goons, and right when you've beaten the battle, Yuri kind of comes out of the shadows and just blasts this dude in the forehead.
Yeah.
We are told that Hammerhead is dead, and then a minute later in the stinger to this episode, we are shown that Hammerhead is brought back to life in the ambulance by a couple of his goons and a good shock stick.
So, all right. So I'm just like I paused you at the end of the synopsis for the last one. I'm going to go ahead and pause you again here. There are a couple of issues. Instead of praising this one, I'm going to point out a couple of issues I have with this one. So one, Yuri Watanabe is a great character,
yes.
And if we hadn't seen her very much in the original game, I would be super pissed that she was absent from most of this game except for a few phone call conversations and then being there at the beginning and being there at the end. But I'm still not happy that she's not there a whole lot, because I think one of the issues with the overall DLC is that Black Cat, Yuri and Silver Sable, who will show up in the third one, are all way more interesting than Hammerhead, but he constantly gets the spotlight.
Yes.
But we'll get to that in a little bit. One of my big problems with this one is that, Yuri goes off, and, it makes sense plot-wise, where Spider-Man's like, hey, you go take care of your soldier, or not your soldiers, but your officers' families. I got this. I'm going to take this weight on my soldier, because that's something Spider-Man would do.
Yep.
It makes sense. But then, from just a mechanic standpoint, just having her kind of off-screen the whole time really sucks. And then my day job is I'm a paramedic. And this dude got shot in the head. He was taken down from the top of a very tall building.
Yep.
He's in a body bag, so he's already been pronounced dead by a medical examiner. Which when that happens, for anybody that doesn't know, the police get called on scene. Like a paramedic or somebody like that doesn't pronounce somebody officially dead. You can pronounce somebody dead enough that you're not trying to resuscitate them. But a medical examiner that is employed by the police is generally the person that comes in and actually officially announces the guy dead. You put him in the body bag and you would take them off to the morgue. So just from the time that it would take to go down the building, to have the police medical examiner come there, pronounce him dead, go down, get into the back of the ambulance, and drive off, there is no way that just shocking him would bring him back. Even if it did bring him back, he would be completely brain dead. There's so many simpler ways to go around this. Have the medical examiner be a member of the mafia, of the Magia is what they're called in this game?
Yes.
He's part of them, so he just gets paid off. He pronounces him dead so that Hammerhead can go underground. Cool. Have him just be knocked unconscious, and then they zap him, and it brings him to. Fine. But the dude's dead for at least 20 minutes before they zap him. I don't care if it's a comic book or not. That's not happening. That's stupid. And there are too many simple ways to fix that.
Yeah. That and it's as I said at the beginning, I did enjoy my time with the DLC, and they are very high quality, but there's a point at which the story itself kind of starts to break down, and a lot of it has to do with the steps they have to take to try and make Hammerhead menacing.
Mm-hmm.
And not a lot of them works. Everything else so well crafted around the other stuff, like the Silver Sable stuff, the Yuri stuff, and the Black Cat stuff, per episode. But it's the main connective tissue, which is supposed to be this bad guy throughout that entire thing. He is just such a low grade dude that even when we get to episode 3, which is where we're headed now, when he becomes a literal robot with a human head, we are really still not even impressed with what is going on.
No.
Yeah, and it ups the ante to the most ridiculous place. Silver Sable finally, from wherever she was after she left during the main game, from wherever she was, comes back after hearing that he has done nothing but steal all of the stuff, all of the Sable equipment that was left in New York City. Comes back in a super hover jet thing, and the two proceed to have this enormous fight throughout both Sable and Hammerhead, Super Hammerhead 209. They have this enormous fight through the skies of New York City, with Peter holding on for dear life until he is about to die, and then out of nowhere, the god in the machine herself, Black Cat, comes flying in, saves Peter, gets him to solid ground, and then is like, "Yo, Peter, I'll see you later," and takes off.
Yep.
It was... I knew she was still alive because I know how comics work.
Mm-hmm.
It was quite possibly the worst way to bring her back.
Yes.
Because even kind of looking at the situation, you're like, okay, Peter's not in any danger. Something's going to happen where he gets saved, but to have that be the thing that saves him is kind of like, okay, you needed to stretch to get her back into the story when we could have done that later. We could have explained that away later. We could have made that a thing that he discovers rather than her kind of swinging in to save the day. It's neat that she finally saved him, because that's what he spent all of episode 1 doing for her, except for that last part where he couldn't get there in time. But apparently he didn't even need to do that because she was fine.
Right.
And then the rest of the DLC is spent not even thinking or addressing that part that just happened, but working with Sable to kind of round up the rest of the goons until you have a fight on her invisible boat on the Hudson River, and like that's where everything comes to a head, and you finally defeat Hammerhead 209. It's straight up like Wonder Woman style invisible jet. She has an invisible boat. Yeah, I mean that reveal was kind of cool. The stuff you do on the boat to kind of get everything working properly, and the final fight with Hammerhead 209 and Sable there is kind of cool because in a lot of ways you're doing the same things you did in other boss fights where it's basically dodge and web him up and make sure you're doing damage to him. But then it's kind of, making sure he is in position and that you're holding on to him so that Sable can shoot with her lasers because you can't really do any damage to this super robot. Right. In a lot of ways, Spider-Man is just acting as a targeting platform himself, and making sure that she can hit him when she needs to.
Right, but similar to like the issues at the end of the second DLC, like there's issues with this one where okay, he's got a metal plate in his head. Yeah, but the rest of his head is just a human head.
It's just a human head.
Like,
the rest of it is fine.
Firing lasers at his entire head just to heat up the metal plate in his head to beat him up. Like, that is his
ludicrous. Jaw made of metal? Could we not aim the laser a little lower and just take out the rest of his head? With the brain, at that point, does he become like Kang from the Ninja Turtles, and now he is just a brain on top of Ed 209? Like, what is the actual point of this?
That would have been interesting if the first time they lasered him up, his face like melted away and it was like a Terminator face underneath.
Especially if Sable in her own like kind of short, fused, badass way was just like, no, we're doing this my way, and she just blasts his face off, and suddenly it's like Robo Hammerhead, and you go, oh, okay, dude's a full-on robot now, let's do this. And then you have to heat up his body to break it apart. That's fine, but yeah, you're totally right. Aiming just for the forehead is like, what are we really doing here?
Yes.
Yeah.
So another note, just about Silver Sable and all the other women in these games. I feel like they get a terrible short end of the stick because, like I said earlier, they're all way more interesting than the actual main villain. Yep. And I feel like that none of them get enough of a time in the spotlight. Silver Sable, I'm the most okay with because she had a decent amount of time in the main game and kind of brought together with what she has in the DLC, I think works pretty well. Even so, I want more Silver Sable because she's basically Lady Russian Batman.
Yes.
And I want more of that.
Yeah, with guns.
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I feel like if you're just a Russian Batman, you're going to have guns.
You might as well have guns. I mean, that's what happens. That's right. It's Russia.
So the other thing, Black Cat, great time in episode 1, but then her Deus Ex Machina moment in episode 3, and then just disappearance. Like, it just feels shortchanged. It really sucks. But the worst one of all three is our beloved Captain Yuri Watanabe. Watanabe. She's off-screen for most of the game in episode 2. She comes back pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, she's there at the beginning, she's there at the end. She comes back pissed. She shoots Hammerhead in the head. And then she gets suspended.
Yep.
And you don't really hear from her in episode 3, but you start finding these crime scenes, which are really well done. I really enjoyed the crime scenes. You find these audio logs where it's excerpts from this guy who's It's this like killer for the Magia, and he's going through therapy. And so you're getting these recreated crime scenes, and you get to the end, and you found that Yuri has gone full vigilante, psychopath, killer, and is like now just straight up.
She's gone Frank Castle.
Yeah, she's absolutely gone the Punisher route. And I feel like it would be such a good story if she was maybe either the main villain of this, say you kill Hammerhead in the last one, and her art throughout all three has been kind of going on a dark path. But no, she's off screen for what happens the whole time where she's going south. And then she's just straight up killer. And like in her note that she leaves you, she's like, you know what, I killed these guys and I thought I would feel bad, but I felt really good. And just like, oh God, like, no, come on. Like, you deserve so much better.
Yeah,
like,
you definitely deserved it to take that, to have the time taken for that turn to make more sense.
Yeah, I think it would have been great.
They try to write it up, and you find, by finding through the audio logs that Yuri has actually kind of had this vendetta for a very long time against Hammerhead and the Magia. Mm-hmm. And so this has been through the better part of her career, that this is something that she has been chasing, and been chasing very hard.
Yes.
So with that, and with the understanding that fell apart in such a dramatic fashion at the start of episode 2, I totally understand where the turn started, but the speed at which the turn completed itself, and I think it's kind of mirrored with the Doc Ock turn as well, is that this Spider-Man of all the things you could possibly level at it, I think its largest issue is the pacing of its villains. Mm-hmm. And the pacings with which the people who become villains actually become villains. It is not a kind of slippery slope. It is an intercontinental shelf of villainy. Yes. It is, you go slightly off the beaten path, you leave the coast of good intentions, and you just fall. There is no stop. It is the bullet train to heck out of Tiny Toons. You load yourself up, and you just go straight down. And by the time you hit the ground, you've been such a villain. You have made that turn so strongly that it's like, well, I guess we're here now. This is what we're doing.
Yes. Absolutely. That's really my only issue with the plot from the main game. I think they do a great job with kind of environmental storytelling and seeing Doc Ock slip into insanity. It's really great looking at the whiteboard in his office and seeing how crazy it gets and how much more violent his arms get, from just normal arms that can hold a tennis ball to these crazy spiky things. It's really cool.
That can hold multiple tennis balls. It's tennis ball escalation. That's the route that those arms are taking.
But there's a moment in the main game right before I think you go to Riker's Island where you're worried about Doc Ock and you tell him not to use the neural connection between himself and the arms, and he's like, yeah, okay. Spider-Man leaves and you see him put it back on, and so from an audience standpoint, he's choosing the madness.
Yes.
And that's great. I think it's a great moment.
Yeah, he's choosing vengeance. He's choosing to go after Osborn. That's the choice he's made. It's made him so upset.
But then you go fight at Riker's, then you get beat up, and a day passes, and the mission that you go on next culminates in finding Doc Ock's lair on top of this giant building in the middle of the city where he's not only rounded up the Sinister Six, but he's also figured out either solutions for whatever issues they have, but he's also figured out ways to further empower them, and he's done things that should take years in 24 hours.
Yep.
And not only from research wise, but also just from being okay, I'm going after Norman, to being I am a villain and I've got a team of 5 other villains and this is gonna be awesome.
Yep.
But even that does not have the same whiplash that Yuri's turn does in episode 3.
Yeah, yeah.
And it makes me real sad.
It's extremely sad. But, like, I look at it as only being extremely sad when compared to as high as the highs go with this game.
Sure. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's sad because they did such a good job with just, I mean, in general, with Doc Ock and Mr. Negative, with Yuri in general, like, I would only care that her turn is not up to snuff if she's a character that I actually care about.
Yes,
and that is the case.
The rest of her character was so fantastic throughout the game.
Yes. Absolutely. Really, the only character that I have major faults with in the entire thing is Hammerhead, and it's just because he's not interesting. He's basically the Donald Trump of the Mafia. He wants to make the Mafia great again. Like, that's it. That's his entire character.
That's kind of the whole thing.
Like,
and it's really terrible too, because he just goes about it in such a like a haphazard way.
And so it makes his whole like vendetta to get this Project Olympus armor, like basically like Iron Man kind of armor. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. At one point in episode 3, he's yelling at the Mafia doctor that, like, just do whatever it takes to make him invincible. It's just like, why? Like, why is this your end goal? Why is wearing a robot suit gonna make the Mafia the big superpower that you want it to be?
How is that gonna bring him back to glory?
What does this do for you?
You're just, I don't know.
Like, it's really easy to make critiques on a story when you're sitting outside of it that's already been made. You know, somebody else has done all of the hard work. So, you know, I'm not the person that wrote this game, and props to them, because overall I think it is really fantastic. Yeah. But personally, I think it would have made so much more sense to have Tombstone be the main villain, because one, you've already grappled with him in the main game. But two, like, the whole, like, getting this armor to become more powerful would make sense for him. He was invincible, and you took that from him, and now he can have a personal goal for himself, but also a personal vendetta against Spider-Man of, you took this from me, like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get back to where I was.
To get back to that level.
Yeah, not the Mafia, not this nebulous organization that I'm going to somehow brute force back to its glory days, but I'm going to get me back to my invincible self. And then just have Hammerhead be like a small side character in the middle of that, because that's usually what he is. Yeah. That's where he deserves to be.
Yeah. And especially seeing him in like a little bit of a major role, you're like, yeah, no, dude, that just doesn't work.
Nope. But overall, like you said, I mean, compared to a lot of DLCs, but especially compared to the game that most people compare Spider-Man to, the Batman Arkham games, these DLCs are amazing, and I thoroughly enjoyed playing through them, even with the issues that I have. And really, I wouldn't nitpick these DLCs as much as I do if I did not enjoy them as much as I did.
Correct. Yep, you are 100% right there. It is they were a pleasure. I did think that it kind of lost its steam towards the end, but they had such a fantastic run through the main game that for it to just kind of beat the bar at the end there is that's enough for me. And I definitely enjoyed my more time spent in Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
So yes,
absolutely. Well, any other thoughts before we move on to the next?
No. I think you, as the self-proclaimed Mr. Spider-Man, you should be playing Spider-Man. That should be happening, and now you should be playing the Spider-Man DLC just so you can see what we're talking about and how much better Jonathan's idea would have been than kind of what they went through and what they used.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Mr. Spider-Man approves.
Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for sitting down with me. We'll be back in just a moment to talk about more video game stuff. Well, that does it for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. You can find more info about the games we discussed, including articles and videos mentioned in the show notes for this episode on darkstation.com, along with the DarkCast Interviews podcast and other video game reviews, previews, and features. Be sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, follow us on Twitter at darkstation_com, find us on Facebook, and check us out on YouTube. And you can email us at podcast@darkstation.com. For Jonathan Paris, Alan Kesinger, and Brian Tyler, I'm Jonathan Miley. Thanks again, and until next time, have a good one.